Welcome to the Argosy podcast. Today, as our guest, we have Nicki Garcia from Talent Group. Welcome, Nikki.
Hi, Greg. It's really nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're very welcome. We're excited to have you. You've been in recruiting since 2007 and now co-founded Talent Group. What did you learn across Robert Half, Pride Staff, availability, and JobBot that shaped how you and your co-founder built Talent Group?
Well, that's a super loaded question, but it's a good one. I think just for me uniquely, I had the opportunity to work for every type of agency that's out there between publicly traded, private sector, locally owned, and now running my own shop as an entrepreneur. And I think that just kind of what I've carried with me is I am my own brand. And that's just really something that I echo to anyone that's in the recruiting business is like the name behind you doesn't really carry as much weight as the individual that shows up every day for the client and for the candidates alike. There's a lot of scariness that comes behind changing shops, right? You're starting a book of business over again. But what I've just figured out is that I am my own brand. And that's, kind of what I tell a lot of individuals. Not so much that there's like a right way or a wrong way, but I just think that the landscape for a recruiter needs to be one that allows them to be the most authentic and most productive, and that sometimes works in a publicly traded environment. It can work in a franchise environment, but it can also work in a privately held environment. So some areas of those businesses are more nimble, some are more strict, some have more metrics, some do not. Every individual, I don't know, functions better in an environment that suits them best. So there's not like a one shop size fits all. And that's really what I've learned is that I am my most authentic, productive self in my own business now that I've created one, having experienced various landscapes. And so again, like there's not a one solution. It's what's the best environment for that recruiter so they can succeed the best.
Excellent answer. And that genuineness comes across, right, to people. The Talent Group talks a lot about a relationship driven consultative approach in a world where recruiting can feel transactional. What does human first executive search look like in practice?
Yeah. Human first always means that there's a human touch from the very first step, from whether it's, taking in a new search or before a client has the opportunity to see a candidate. It's like our promise is there's human touch throughout every step of the process. And that means gathering context and everything that's outside of the two-dimensional piece of paper. So it's white glove, it's very custom fit, and I have designed the business in such a way that my human touch is what works best for you? What is your process and how can I enhance your process or maybe offer some suggestions to better it? But I'm more of a compliment than a dictator in the process. So that's kind of how we position ourselves with human centered is what's best for the human that I'm sitting in front of right now.
Yeah, that partner approach is always the best, right, when you're helping them.
Sure.
You said one of the biggest compliments you hear is I applied, or one of the biggest complaints I should say you hear, I've applied for a job and never heard anything. Why is candidate communication still so broken, and what does that tell us about the state of hiring right now?
I mean, who hasn't heard that? I mean,
Everyone.
that that's the coin right there. There's responsibility on both ends, right? On the individuals posting a job, but also on the applicants themselves. I think that we get so much in the rut of apply, 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 and I'm not really giving that job post much thought, but sometimes I don't think that the posters have given it much thought. So I think the whole like lack of communication comes from the daunting task of I have to get through so many applications. I can't possibly call every single person. And is there a way to, I guess, like communicate front end if someone's even a match for the job fairly? And is there a way to communicate with those after the job has been closed? What's happening with
Mm.
the job? I think the most important of all three of those steps, both applicant, those interviewing, and those that are passed on, what do you do with the people that are in the process? What does that communication look like? Because you can even get dropped mid-interview process and never hear another word. And I think that's the biggest dagger of them all is those that we're actually engaged with that are left in the unknown. And I think that that's honestly like that's the biggest hurt right there. And there has to be solutions built around that specifically. For sure. For sure.
Very insightful comment there, because we've all been there, right?
Yeah, totally.
You've also talked about employers struggling to get the word out that they're hiring. Is the real issue job ads, or is it employer branding and reputation?
It's really not an either or. I mean, if you think about it this way, if employers that have a great brand and take large corporations for that matter, a McDonald's or a Visa or something of that nature. But then there's also local companies that have a great brand where they live. And where I live, there's several that are like the iconic employers of the area. They carry more than 10,000 employees, right? They have a standing brand because of size. So how do you get noticed amongst them? I don't think it's always a job posting per se. Sometimes it's just a matter of reach and simply personal networking, right? If the business is very small, their reach is going to be very small. If the business is very big, their reach is going to be very big. So I don't know necessarily if it's a posting thing or an employer branding thing, but I will tell you though that online presence does matter because everything that we're doing is on a phone. So if your process inhibits the ability to be smooth and simple, where they don't have to carve out a time to sit at a computer and actually do something or go in person,
Yeah,
and there's not an ease of use to get an application in or at least get noticed, we have to remove some of those roadblocks to make the application process a little bit more inviting, ease for the user. But furthermore, it doesn't help if you've got a horrible reputation online and word of mouth is not doing you any favors. Like that employer reputation can absolutely hurt you. And you could kind of be known as a churn and burn place. And that's not fun either. Again, that's business problems are going to always be the people problem, right? It's
great.
who's posting the job is a person, who's interviewing, it's a person, who's dealing with the employer branding, that's all your people. The business problem is always a people problem. So that's why like my job matters so much is right people on the bus, right? Because that's how you fix problems, right? So yes, postings have a lot to do with it, but the employer branding, I think they work hand in hand. I don't really think it's an either or situation.
Thanks for breaking that down. It's just not one answer, right? Across the whole landscape. Very good. You made the point that good candidates are often not sitting on job boards all day, and how employers should really rethink attraction if they want to reach the people who are actually thriving where they're at.
I mean, yeah, think about your life, Greg. Some of the best people we've ever worked with or ever hired came from one of two places: a referral, right? Like somebody we knew internally through a network. And some of the better ones are the ones that you've noticed in the industry that you're like, God, if I could just have them on our team. I mean, think of every professional team on the market, right? And I look at businesses a lot like teams in sports, right? You have captains, people running it, leading it, managing it. You have the players that are actually doing it. So if you want to increase your team winning, making money,
Mhm.
you are going to want to attract talent. And the way that you do that is by going after the ones that maybe aren't looking, ones that maybe cost you a little bit more money because you're going to get what you pay for. And that's
Mhm.
pretty fundamental. Now, when I say pay, it's not always dollars, right? Pay is in time and effort and energy and getting the individual. Pay is the cost of providing great benefits and the flexibility. Those things come at a cost. So, absolutely, you can't build a great team without targeting and knowing what you're going after and who you want to go after. So being aware of those in your industry that might make a big difference in your business or knowing what the core skills are that you can build on. They don't have to be
Mm.
plug and play, but like if it's something you can work with and build on and they have all the right characteristics that your organization values, back to what I said earlier, then building the right team absolutely comes down to who you hire, which to your point is, you know, fundamentally just figuring out who to go after and how. So that's all. I always use sports as an analogy because there is a wicked amount of similarities and everyone can relate to sports in some way.
Right.
So I hope
Yeah.
that answers it, but that's kind of the bluntest.
Yeah. No, that does answer it. It basically comes down to knowing what you're going after and having goals, right? And going after, and how you want to build your team out. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's
You know
some
your weakness?
fundamentals like you mentioned,
Yeah, plug the weakness. What's the hole in the boat, right? Oh my
right?
god, we stink at marketing, we stink at sales, we stink at analyzing the data, like, you know where your problems are. So,
Very sports
identifying
relatable,
yeah, find the problem, go recruit the player, right?
right?
So,
Yeah, very.
that's why I think what we do is very unique because there's a customization to that type of person, and there's multiple types of people that can fit that bill, and that's where the chemistry comes in. So, yeah, absolutely.
You said that candidates are often judged by that two-dimensional piece of paper, the resume, while recruiters add the story behind the page, right?
Yeah,
What context do hiring teams miss when they rely too heavily on that resume?
why? They always miss the why because paper doesn't talk, right? It doesn't tell you why. Context is like 100% absolutely everything. I think that's probably why it was one of my more viral posts because I think it strikes a chord for a lot of people. The why describes the misunderstood, right? So you might look at something and think, oh, this is terrible. But when given the appropriate and honest explanation, it's now in the seat of the individual receiving that information to say, is that something I'm willing to accept or not? But at this point, now you have the facts. Now you have it all in front of you, right? You have the actual situation and the why behind it. I will live and die on that sword. The why matters. The context will always matter. And unfair judgment comes when unfair judgment comes, right? So you can look at something and just automatically assume something. And yes, that stereotype exists for a reason. People that bounce around a lot, there's a problem there. But if you figure out the problem is something like when you interview them, it's always the problem of the employer, and you start to see a pattern within the interview or the initial conversation, you know what you're dealing with. Or, hey, I lived here. I had a sick parent. I had a baby. The business closed. I
Mhm.
graduated college and my availability changed. Context matters. So, quickly on in the process, you can identify the patterns that you run away from. And I think that is exactly why I say what I say every single time. And
Yeah,
that's why context will always matter. And I think if the application process invited that concept, which is kind of what we used to use the cover letter for, right? It's the context behind the resume. That's why
hmm,
there's so much value and weight in that. It's missed. And that's what AI is great for too. I mean, you might not have a lot of time to read a cover letter, but if your intake tool is reading that and the resume, I mean,
yeah,
there's massive opportunity there for people to actually be seen for what they are and who they are and not what AI wrote on a resume or what I wrote on a resume or what I paid someone to write on a resume. Like the
yeah,
authenticity is more prevalent there.
yeah. What a powerful expression there. Basically, background, right? Getting their background, and to kind of play off that a little bit, because you mentioned a little bit about this. You push back on the idea that job hoppers are automatically a red flag. What do employees get wrong when they oversimplify career movement? It kind of is an extension of the last question a little bit, but
Yeah.
maybe, yeah.
You mean like employees or employers get wrong?
Well, yeah, what do employers get wrong? Because sometimes people are prejudged on
Oh, yeah.
moving every couple years or even every year, right, from one opportunity to another. But does this play out the
Yeah.
context, kind of the context premise, like knowing the employee?
Yeah. I think what they get wrong is they assume that somebody won't last because if they left somewhere else quickly, they're going to leave me quickly. And that's very relevant. I mean, that's common sense, right? You can't ignore it, right? But if you understand the reason behind someone's movement, and as an employer, you're like, you just need to get off at 4 o'clock every day. That's why you left that job. You can leave here at 4 every day. Problem solved, right? So I think that we miss out on really talented people over very small misunderstandings. There's huge opportunity there for people to be a little bit more open minded and to maybe hear some truth than to just miss out on a great person because you assume the worst when in reality it could be a very simple fix.
Wow, how insightful that is, right? If people really took the time to think through that, the employers in this case. So you shared an example of a company posting a president role publicly and then creating the wrong market signal. How often do companies actually damage their own search by poor optics?
Yeah, that's that's such a good question. here's the thing. Again, back to employer branding, right? What we put out in the universe is what people see, right? Perception's
Right.
reality.
Exactly.
Uh, you know, it's not like the United States when we are having an election looking for a president. The whole world knows we need a president. But when you are in a business that's in a highly competitive market or a competitive space, maybe you're a business that uh I don't know, has been around for a really long time and is very reliable, and all of a sudden word gets out that the man in charge or the woman in charge is departing and a new one's coming in, that doesn't just freak out the general public. It freaks out the people that are working there. And unless
Right.
it's a situation where we are dealing with a retirement or somebody's been there a really long time, the communication and the messaging that that sends to internal and external people is such a recipe for disaster. How are you gonna control a narrative when the person at the top is departing and
Mhm.
there wasn't a lot of lead up to it, right? Like, everyone knows when the president's role is expiring, 4 years, right? We all know that's coming, we're prepared for that, the communications are there, people are campaigning. When
Mhm.
your head of organization is departing or is left or you're running an ad that you are filling that position and the appropriate narratives haven't been taken care of, and this is like my shout out to all PR people, is you're allowing people to create their own stories, which you cannot control. You cannot put out that fire. It just keeps spreading.
Yeah.
You want to have control over that. You want to have control over as much of it as you possibly can, not only to protect your current players so they're not thinking, oh my gosh, I need to leave, especially if the person that was in the chair just took another job. And if they loved that leader, then what? So, yes, there are some things keep close to the chest, right? It's like growing
Mhm.
up as parents. It was better for parents to argue behind closed doors before major changes were made instead of having that argument left out on the table. The same thing in the workplace, right? Things that are the big changes that are happening should be handled with care, with delicacy, with as much confidentiality as possible so that when the information does get out, it's controlled, it's clear, it's fair, it's honest, it's transparent, leaving people. Yes, you're still going to have those that are going to do their thing, right? But I mean, at least at that point, you can feel good about the message that's getting pushed out internally and
Right.
externally.
Right.
There's not many
Yeah.
head of companies positions out there, right? So they get noticed more. Draws a lot of
Right.
attention.
I've even seen that in on departmental heads within a company where the departmental head, the VP leaves and okay, then he's gonna come the new person's gonna come in and it's gonna be kind of a chain reaction, replacement of, directors, managers, and then is the manager gonna bring in his other engineers, right? So you start looking
Mhm.
around and going, "Hey, I don't know if this is," but if it's handled differently, if the company's right on top of it and the VP leaves and there's communication to the employees, "Hey, you're valuable. We need you. Our vision is here. We're only hiring people with this vision." That's a whole communication that kind of settles and people, you're more likely to keep. I've seen companies keep staff, right? Whereas, like you said, if there's no communication, this is kind of going back to what you've been saying. If there's communication there and it's relayed properly, then the organization is more healthy as a whole
Well, think of it
during
this way.
change.
Who is the busiest person in an organization? Usually the people at the top, right? The presidents,
Right.
the people running the
Exactly.
show.
Right.
Okay, so if they're so busy, why are they gonna be looking at a job board for their next opportunity? I mean, even if they're wildly disgruntled, they're dealing with the house that they're dealing with typically. Like, they're not scouring job boards unless they're displaced, unless maybe they know their job is expiring, and even then, people at that level know how to network, right? Like, their days of pounding pavement for a paycheck are over at that point, usually in their career. So,
Mhm.
professional representation is absolutely something they lean on. The best talent in the world always has an agent. Think about it, right?
Right.
You think about anyone in the world that has gotten to a very, very high level, they have people managing things for them. Someone managing their career makes absolute sense. It's essentially their agent to assure that the next place they land is giving them everything they need and they want. It's I mean, to me, it sounds like common sense, but maybe not. So that's why I think I say it the way I say it is, Yeah, like contextually, the higher the level the position, the more delicate you have to be with it, and that's why confidential searching is so critical, especially for those entertaining the opportunity, right? It could go really good or really bad. And again,
Right.
context will matter, right? The why.
Yeah, the background and then also keeping everybody informed. Communicating and maybe not communicating to the public, depending upon the role, as was mentioned there with the president role at that one company. From your perspective, what's the biggest bottleneck to growth for a talent acquisition firm like Talent Group today? Is it sourcing, client education, or is it something else?
That's a good question. That one's a really hard one for me to answer because I don't if you're talking about growth for us as an organization, if you're talking about growth for businesses, I guess that's my question is like which which is it that you're asking?
So, companies like yourself, where you have two founders working on a business and in the talent acquisition space. So,
Yeah.
what's the biggest hurdle?
Yeah.
Is there a different glass ceilings that you have to break through, whether it be
But
revenue
yeah.
or just growing?
Yeah, well, they're not glass ceilings for sure. I mean, that's Whitney, my business partner, would surely tell you there's no ceilings, right? There's just different roads to take. Growth for a small business when you're starting out is challenging for a couple of reasons. One, capital, right? Our business is very cyclical. It can be very feast and famine. But for us, it is really bandwidth, how to be all things to all people all the time, right? It's like parenting. So how do you manage a client, manage a search, do new business development. Yeah, it's hard to do all of those things with 2 people. So, strategizing on how to minimize non-revenue generating activities so that we can execute on the things that do generate revenue, right?
Mhm.
Meeting with great candidates, meeting with great customers. How do we spend our time to execute those things without losing our sanity and who we are and the brand that we're trying to portray? That's always gonna be the toughest part, but I would say the most time consuming aspect of our business really is the sourcing for candidates. I think that's probably where I spend the most of my efforts, and if I could create time, I would create it in that particular space.
So, having something that would actually source them faster, because is there a kind of a cutoff between the time you get a request for to fill a role and where that dies with the requesting HR department? Is you have a certain like time limit, 72 hours or a week, or is there?
Yeah, no, I don't put time limits until I know what's happening with the client, right? I have to run at their speed, what they're ready for. For me, I wish I could turnkey in 72 hours, 48 hours, but realistically, if I'm doing my job right, that's not enough time, especially if it's somebody who's gainfully employed and in a great situation. For
Mhm.
them to even consider leaving that and entertaining another job, there's more to it than just interviewing, right? You're uprooting tenure, you're uprooting benefits, you're uprooting your vacation, you're uprooting your loyalty, you're uprooting so much. So if I'm doing my job right, I need to allow people the space to decide and think through what a job change is
Mhm.
going to look like at this point in their life. And I tell that to a client too. So the time limit for me is just the keeping the client informed, right? Like I want them to be able to hear from me every day or every other day throughout the search, even if it's a quick note, like this is what I'm working on, this is what I haven't seen anything, whatever. I think just keeping them apprised, just much like a candidate would wanna be apprised, I think that's really where the time thing is the timely and the thoughtful updates and letting them know what I'm hearing in the market. Because the market's
Okay.
gonna drive everything.
Okay.
I could have all the aspirations in the world and spend all the time in the world and not meet a 72-hour mark. And then who wins? No one. I'm gonna be mad at myself, the client's gonna be mad. So why put a ticker on something when it
Yeah.
just comes about what is their need? How quickly do they need it? And is that realistic? And can I meet that need? I will be straight up yes or no. But
Okay.
I
So you
use
you said X,
the triangle method for that, right? Price, quality, speed. What's
right?
2 things you want, client? You want something fast for cheap? We're gonna sacrifice quality, right? So that's where the time drivers come in, is like, if speed
Yeah.
isn't of an essence, then why am I gonna drive really, really fast if you're not really ready? And if quality is most important, then we focus on the quality. So I don't really let time always be the driver, right? Like the client kind of dictate of the 3, what are the 2 we have to focus on?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a very balanced way of doing it, right? Yeah, it's kind of it makes sense because sometimes it's setting expectations with the client on
Right.
what the reality is. It sounds like. So, what's the biggest opportunity right now for firms like Talent Group? Is it confidential executive search? Is it that fractional leadership that we're seeing more and more, or is it something else altogether?
Well, yes, I think the biggest opportunity is recruiters working in areas that they know really well. I think that confidential, specialized search is imperative. I mean, that's the biggest value that I provide. It's not the type of position, it's the fact that I know the area. I know the players, I know the people, I know who's been where and why typically. That's the value, right? Is because I can provide information that you as a client, because you're busy running your business, you would never know or understand. Again, I can provide a lot of context, which helps them, alleviate any of the animosity or anxiety that they get in the hiring process. But that absolutely in and of itself is a niche. But another one that I'm seeing quite a great deal of is just the career coaching. It's the getting somebody job ready is a general term, but if you're an executive, if you've been someone that's been in a job for over 5 years, the job landscape has changed, even in 5 years, even in 10 years. So if you've been really in the job for a long time, the idea of needing to find another job is absolutely terrifying if you haven't been doing it. And so I think that there's a huge opportunity for businesses like myself to provide a paid service that really truly gets someone ready to take that first interview and show up well, be ready for the interview, have all their ducks in a
Mhm.
row, have the appropriate resumes put together, how to do research. There's so much that goes into looking for a job that people just aren't ready for. And I get on these prep calls sometimes and I realize, my goodness, like there's hours of work that should be leading them up to this point in time, and they can absolutely blow it or absolutely nail it, and it has everything to do with the prep. So I think that there's this opportunity for us that have watched how companies hire to help individuals become job ready. Like I said, because I work with every type of business under the sun and everybody does things differently, it's equipping them to be prepared for anything, right? It's like the military.
Nice.
We could plan for all we want, but you're planning for the worst case scenario, and that's how you win. That's how you win in the interview. That's how you win the job. That's how you win an offer. Is is oftentimes beating out others because of the preparedness that they put forth. I mean, you cannot just show up, wing it, and get it. It's not usually it's not usually how it goes. So that job readiness, I'd like to figure out how to monetize that a little bit because you could definitely do. And I've done some executive coaching this last year, and it's I don't know. I think it really just makes people at ease. Nobody likes to do this. This isn't like their
Right.
favorite thing. Public speaking, what is the number one fear? I mean, an interview is
Right.
public speaking. That's terrifying. Nobody wants to do that. So
So,
I don't know.
job readiness from the candidate side is what you're talking about, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Clients have a role in that. Absolutely. Like, it would be nice. There was one client that had done it recently. It would be really nice to see a client send a candidate things to prepare them for the conversation,
Mhm.
who they're meeting with, maybe things about them, things that would prepare them to talk about. I mean, honestly, what is the harm in giving the candidate some insight, like preparing for a conversation? So that everybody gets the most out of that time. Like, why the surprise?
Mhm.
Why does everybody need to show up and just be like, "Oh god, what am I stepping into?" Why the guessing games? Truly doesn't make any sense for me because a very small percentage of the population can pull that off and pull it off well. So the preparation, I think clients, I mean, gosh, I could never monetize that. But for the candidate, absolutely. Again, there's some responsibility on both ends of it. But the candidate, they carry all the problems, unfortunately. So I always think about them first,
Thanks for that
top spot.
background. Yeah. So, what are you seeing competitors do right? That is smart, and what are you seeing some of your competitors do that's you feel it feels dangerous or short sighted in the talent acquisition space, like recruiters?
Yeah. I think what I see folks do really well right now is recruiters understanding that they have a responsibility to build their own reputation and to show their culture, right? Whether it's just a team of 1 or a team of 100. I'll use a past employer, for example. What I loved about what they did was they were constantly promoting what they were doing for their people as recruiters, right? An army of recruiters, how they treated them, how they rewarded them,
Mhm.
how they acknowledged them. It created, at that time when I went to work there, it created the biggest buzz I had ever seen ever. And it scaled very quickly. And it had a lot to do with knowing they had good technology, knowing they had great benefits, knowing they rewarded their recruiters. People that worked hard got rewarded, and they showed it. Like, they did everything in their power to say, "Look, guys, this is how we operate. This is how we
Right.
treat people." That was really what drew me in as a recruiter, not to mention the fact that it was fully remote. They provided you the right tools. They had a great system. What they did really well was just support the recruiters however that looked. In fact, one of the things that I will absolutely take with me for the rest of my life is they trusted you from day one. There was not like a period where I had to prove myself to be trusted as a professional. That's what they were doing really well. And they made it known. They made it known from the very get go. And I think that that's a really hard thing to do. If recruiters could show that kindness does really go a long way, both on an internal basis, but to the candidates they serve and the clients they serve, I mean, that's crazy. That actually will spread like wildfire. But on the flip side, I think what I feel is getting a little dangerous in the recruiting space is the initial interactions and understanding what the expectations are, and people not sure, am I talking to a bot? Am I talking to a person when they're doing the
Mhm.
intake process? There's a little bit of weirdness there I've experienced, and that makes me a little leery is how they're involving AI in the intake process, or maybe even disclosing upfront how they take their intake process and why it's valuable. I also think I've always thought this about the industry, and that is blind submitting candidates without their authorization. So I think just involving botting on the front end of recruitment where there's actually no human interaction at all, or us as recruiters just submitting people blindly to customers without their knowing or their authorization.
Mhm.
Those are the 2 areas that they've always given me the heebie-jeebies. I've never fully understood absolutely no human interaction on the front end, and I've never understood blind submittals, like where you,
Yep.
Greg, as the individual, are unaware that your file just went to X, Y, and Z.
Right.
Those 2 concepts for me, I've never been able to digest. And so those are the 2 areas I wholeheartedly try to avoid because I've never see it pay off really well. So,
Yeah. Would you sum both of those up, the good and the bad, as trust? Because it sounded like when people trusted you, that
yeah.
made a big difference. And then the other side, if a candidate can't trust the recruiter, yeah, it's not a good thing, right? When trust is broken,
Yeah.
or
I mean,
yeah,
I'll give you an example. So in my industry, I just want people to find the right job for themselves. I don't care if it's through me. I don't care if it's through somebody else, right? The idea is that there's diligence and thoughtfulness in their search and that they're being honest and true to themselves. So the example I'll give you is this. I work with an individual that has been pounding pavement, really trying to find a job, and they have a tremendous skill set. And there was a situation where I had been working on a search for quite some time, developing the role, working on the role, and the needs of the role have shifted quite a bit. But I've had this individual in front of that customer for quite some time. And the play out was we just needed to figure out what the client really wanted before we engaged in a conversation. Well, there are recruiters out there that decided that they would just go to job boards, pull job descriptions, market the job description to candidates blindly with never having spoken to the customer, pitching that they're a client, and then taking that candidate when they've engaged in interest and sending their file to the client. And there's such an ick behind that. And I have seen that probably more times in the last 6 months than I have ever seen in my career. And so, again, that human element, like we talked about very early on in the process, I know I'm talking to a human. I know Nikki is real. I know she lives in the valley. I know she knows that customer and that trust that what I'm telling you is true and that this is a real
right.
opportunity, a real job for you is a far cry different than trying to grab a job order by soliciting candidates with a job posting when they've never had any interaction with that customer to begin with. That I think is that slippery slope where I just get a little bit angst. And that comes down to trust. Like, can I trust what you're telling me is true? Like, never in my world as a recruiter should you ever question what I'm telling you. Like, ever. So it's same true
Right.
to the client, right? They never should have to question that what I'm telling them is true, even if it's hard.
A career move is such a big life change. It's one of those life
Yeah,
changes. So yeah, you got to. So I appreciate that in-depth answer. So you've also talk about trust, right? So you've spoken about AI blindness before. What does AI generally? How does it generally help recruiters? And then where does it start replacing the judgment that should never be outsourced?
right? Oh my gosh, that's good too. So AI blindness is something that I ran across on an article in the New York Times. And it was something that made me pause for a second and realize as flippantly as we dabble in it, we so quickly just accept what we see, right? Without fact checking, without pre-reading, without making sure that it really aligns with everything else. We've lost the ability to check things, right? AI blindness is allowing ourselves to collect AI information, make decisions based on it without really ever checking it. And so if you show up in a room and everyone's using AI
Mhm.
for ideas to bring to the table and no human audit or context was ever involved,
Right.
you just had like 5 different AI tools, Claude, ChatGPT, whatever you're using to show up to the table with ideas. So you just had the machine do all of the thinking. And in reality, while that might save time, I think the blindness occurs when we're not just disclosing how that information came to be. It's like writing a paper back in college. I'll date myself, having a works cited page, right? Where did I get
Mhm.
this information? Is it credible information? Where did that come from? Do I know it to be true? Think about it this way: AI blindness is my way of saying it, check yourself, right? We as human beings do work every day. Why do you think there's audits? Why do you think there's auditors? Why do you think there's because human error is 100% real. Well, if there's human error, we've already been told that there's error in AI. So where's the audit? So the blindness comes with not disclosing where it's coming from, not disclosing it that it's being used for those ideas. They were authentically yours. Maybe the concept was and you used AI to frame it differently. That's great. But AI blindness is showing up in a situation and not disclosing really how that thought came to be and what was genuinely your idea, just refined with context, or are we just allowing the AI to do all of the thinking for us? I don't know if that helps, but
It does.
I think that that's kind of where I sit on it right now, and I love it. That's I the human audit factor just keeps coming to mind every time I use it in my day-to-day life and work too. I mean, I can even give you an example of it. When I write a presentation of a candidate and
Mhm.
I capture their interview via AI tools through recording and it captures our conversation, I actually go back through and read it and then say and then add my own kind of conversational pieces and I still send it to the candidate before it goes to a customer. Why? Because what if the AI got it wrong? What if like it misspoke or it got a fact incorrect and they show up to an interview and the client thinks one thing, but it's actually not true? I need my human, my candidate, to proofread what I'm putting in front of a customer. I mean, yes, it refined the process. It saved me tons of time. Greg, it saves you tons of time. But like
Right.
putting that back in front of the associate to say, did we get it right? Is this 100% true and accurate? Because this is your life we're talking about. I want to get it right.
Right. Not assuming and then sending it on without their review. Right. Yeah. No, that's a great
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
So let's dive a little bit deeper on AI because you yourself says you use like note AI for note capture, ATS workflows, and scheduling. What does good AI adoption look like inside a recruiting firm that still wants to stay, as you were talking about compliance, right? Stay compliant, thoughtful, and have that warm human element that we need.
Yeah. Um, I think that it starts out with having a strategy, identifying where people are spending most of their time and identifying how AI can eliminate work that's not doesn't require the human interaction, like the transcribing of an interview, for instance. I think that people don't realize oftentimes that information that's thrown out into the AI doesn't keep it private, right? And so, as an organization, just protecting yourselves with where that information is coming from, what are you spitting into it? Are you paying for it? Is it private? Is it open? Those are the concepts I just encourage people. So when the adoption occurs, I think when it's done well is when it's everybody's aware of it. You're being trained internally on how to use it. The Copilot is literally everywhere now when you're in Microsoft. So even just creating activities around your team on giving them a circumstance in which you want them to use I solely to do one project. There was a guy that heads up AI and strategy for GE on a podcast that I heard, and he talks about once or twice a month where they're having their talent acquisition teams work on a project solely using AI. So, like, they create a scenario and they tell them to go deal with that scenario and using all the AI tools, just getting people familiarized with it, using it, prompts, that sort of thing. And that was very interesting to me because they might come back to him with ideas on how AI could make their jobs better that he might not have ever thought of, which I loved. And I also loved the idea that it's very open, right? We want to know when it's being used, we want to know how it's being used. So I think recruiting agencies have to think about where
Mhm.
their time's getting sucked and is there a tool to refine that, eliminate error, make things move faster, create more accuracy. And that's honestly where I think people need to start looking at opportunities is where all the administrative functions are bogging us down from focusing on the activities where human interaction is most important, right?
Yeah.
There's a litany of things that you can use, but having a strategy, being open and transparent about it, putting policies behind it on what tools can be used, right? So information of the organization's not getting casted into the world, right? Those are just the three main ones that I would think across the board are absolutely important, but also just being aware of what's out there too. I don't know how you go about it, Greg, but it's hard to keep up on all the things that are coming out. Every day I feel like there's a new one that pops into my feed and I'm like, "Ooh, I want to look into that little guy right there. What does he do or what does she do?" And just being curious about it too is hard and knowing what tools are going to be most effective for the recruiter themselves. Because our
Right.
job is it can get muddy. It can get muddy really quick.
Yeah. Thanks for the good and bad of AI there. That was a good kind of rounded answer on both of those positions. But yeah, there's a lot that comes out. I was just talking to somebody in the recent past who actually is building what they would call the consumer reports or the wire cutter for AI tools, and he said he gets AI tools, multiple AI tools every day are being made.
That's crazy.
So he's just constantly intake, and analyzing tools. Whether they stay afloat is one thing, but there's so many that are coming out on a regular basis, and yeah, it's
Yes.
hard to keep up. Yep.
And you could use like AI tools for everything, right? And what you want to avoid is having too many. You don't want to have to jump to one and jump to another and jump to another. That's also not productive use of our time. So it is hard to find how to refine your desk and how to refine your tasks without becoming a ping pong machine. Because as recruiters, it's just there's always something to be done. And the pinging is really what can get you. It's like, oh, and then what tool do you use at what time? So yeah, that's really interesting. But I'd be curious, the consumer reports of AI tools, that's gonna blow my mind because I love consumer reports. It's like, am I buying a refrigerator? I'm buying a car. Ooh, what's the latest? Like, what car seat should I buy? I couldn't even imagine for AI tools. And if they had a specific one by industry, like here's good tools if you're in this industry in sales and recruiting and
Yeah.
widget making or whatever, I would be tickled. You better keep me posted on that because I want to know when that comes out
Yeah.
for sure.
Yeah, he is breaking it down into category. I think he's a lot of his clients right now are municipalities, so cities, government, stuff like that, and how they can get the right tools. So, and then he's going to break it out for different industries. So it's going to be exciting. I think there's a lot of potential
That
there, right? Because we want somebody to grade them for us ahead of time, like we do anything. We
yeah,
buy a coffee grinder, right? We want to know what's the best. So
most frequently returned item, right? Like most frequent free trial dropped. Like We did not re-up after free trial. This one was out the door.
That's what exactly.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah. So you how should hiring teams think about talk about kind of continue the discussion about how we can really put the human element into things. So how should hiring teams think about bias in an era where human bias and algorithmic
Algorithms?
bias, yeah, kind of there's kind of can be a compounding effect, right? If
Yeah,
one doesn't cancel out the other. So
yeah.
how should they think about bias checking?
Bias checking really starts with how you train people. We all have bias because we all come from different walks of life and we've been bit and burned and, I obviously treated well. So our bias come from our own personal experiences. Now, I think the way to avoid it though, and the algorithms is knowing and how to acknowledge when it's happening. When we feel like it's happening, like if you have a fundamental flaw, like say for instance, your bias is if somebody's had worked for more than 3 companies in 10 years, they're not gonna be a good fit here, right? Like, just
Mhm.
having this natural bias of, "I just know this not to work, and here's why," without ever creating that like, we talked about context, right?
Right.
Um, you have to know the potential bias to begin with and how to identify them and to call them out before they actually occur. There was a gal that did a speaking engagement for us years ago about bias behavior, and it was an attorney that talked about, in HR how when you're doing investigations, how bias can fall into play with juries and how decisions are made, whether it be a good outcome, bad outcome, right, for the employer. But
Right.
it was identifying the bias in the room. So that really comes down to the amount of experience that a recruiter has, maybe the amount of success or not success that they've had as a recruiter, and then really sitting down with them and helping them identify what is a common bias, what's acceptable and what's not. And if you appear to see a bias, how do you screen it in or out? What are the questions that you're going to use, a tool that you're going to use to either choose to accept that, like maybe it is true and your bias is correct, or maybe it's not true. And maybe we leave that to a reference check, or we leave that to maybe another manager interviewing that candidate that just sees things from a different lens, right? So avoiding it's really difficult unless you are not honest with yourself that we all have them, and that not ignoring the idea that maybe everything that's at surface isn't always the best, that there is opportunity just below the surface because that algorithm might have pushed different folks to the top of the haystack. And so that's why collectively more than one interview is really appropriate. Having different types of people interviewing is really important. Knowing what each step of the interview collects in terms of information and
Mhm.
collectively reviewing it as a whole and not isolating one opinion over the other. And that's where I see the most success happen because biased or not, they're not always bad when you're collecting different thoughts in the process. So knowing your personality type, knowing the experience of that recruiter, that's why they have recruiter one, recruiter twos, recruiter threes, executive recruiters because they probably have had more experience and allowing different types of individuals to interface with those associates along the
Mhm.
way really can alleviate okay did we make a biased hiring decision or not because there's that
Yeah.
whole like I hire who I like or who you know what I mean or who is most like me. You see a lot of that kind of bias, or you see the people that hire because they're afraid of what that person brings to the table. There's a fear factor, so there's like the bias magnet and the bias fear factor, and so you don't always know. So again, like, being realistic about the hiring process and who's involved is honestly the only way around that, and coaching people through the idea that it's very prevalent and it's gonna always be there. You can't get rid of it. And AI is a good way to kinda get around that oftentimes, but you can't take the human out of it, so now we gotta deal with it.
Yeah. Thanks for helping us understand a complex subject. And I know certain, like you said there at the end, AI does have some. There's some like Claude is very good with bias analysis
Yeah.
and finding bias, but you can't take the human out of it. So it is still very complex, and but you kind of broke it down so that it helped us understand those complexities. Thank you very much for doing that. And then here's a question about wish list. So the employer has a wish list, and then the employee has a wish list, right? So, and you posted about this references, ghosting, bias, and follow up. When you look across all of that, what do you think candidates most wish employers understood? And then on the opposite side, what do you think employers most wish candidates understood?
I think candidates, they all of them have different needs and they're listed differently. They're top 1, 2, and 3. I think that all they really want is the employer to know, like, what is most important to them and what motivates them. I think those are really it. But the most important to them, like, ranked, right? There's the litany of things that you get when you take a job, right? There's pay, there's benefits, there's time off, there's flexibility, there's a number of things. The candidate going into the conversation, the situation needs to be able to articulate what their needs list is and really truly what is most important. Sometimes money isn't the driver, sometimes it's the flexibility. Sometimes the benefits really is the driver. Like they wouldn't be talking to you if this benefits package didn't trump what they currently have because of their family. So I think for people to be able to arrive at the table and truly say like this is what's most important to me and why, and the employer doing the same, like they their ability to articulate what problem they're trying to solve by hiring for this position, what they hope to accomplish, and talking about how they integrate people into the ecosystem. I don't really know a way to say like everyone's wish lists don't align. But I think sometimes candidates are a little bit afraid to ask for something if they think it's gonna cost them the job, and I think clients sometimes are in the same boat. They don't ever wanna make the offer and be told no, right? It's like proposing to your spouse and just thinking like, "Oh, what if they don't say yes?" Like, you don't wanna go into that transaction without knowing in your head that it's gonna be a yes, and you need to know what needs to be present to get them there. So the wish lists with the recruiter, the nice thing about it is people can be brutally honest with me and they can be brutally honest with me on both sides of the coin. And I can figure out where the misalignment is. As long as everybody realizes that the wish lists coming to the table is just the start of a conversation. It's not a we get one shot at this and we get one shot and it's either going to work or blow up. I think
Mhm.
that's really where the magic happens is being truly honest about what the needs are and why, and the client doing the same and realizing that the first crack at it doesn't need to be bliss. Like we didn't discover electricity on the first shot. Thank God someone kept trying, right? It is that it's a start of a conversation. And a candidate that I worked with recently said that exact thing like, "Hey, this isn't the offer that I wanted, but what I love is this is the start of a conversation." Like
Yeah.
this is just part 1 and I'm okay with that. And it was like, huh, okay. You just look at that like, this is my wish list, this is yours, and we're just starting a conversation and we're going to talk. We know that we're going to talk through this because we both want at the end to be together. Then everyone's wish lists are going to look different, right? But
Right.
it's
Yeah.
really engaging honestly in that conversation with the idea at the end in mind is that we're going to be together. So
Right.
yeah, the wish
Yep.
lists are really important, but you just got to be able to just say what's so for you
Right.
uninhibitedly.
Yeah. Straightforward. And a great illustration on electricity. I think there's a number of how many times Thomas Edison tried to get electricity to work.
So
So
we've been
that's a
told,
very,
right?
yeah, very apt illustration. So thank you for that. So let's do a scenario here. So let's say you're advising a mid-sized company, talent group, and you're there, and the client comes in and says, "Nikki, we're getting applicants, but not the right hires." What's the first thing that talent group does? What are the first three things you audit with that
Oh,
company?
for the customer. Well, yeah. Oh man, there's so many things. Well, if they've been running an ad and they're getting a lot of applicants, but they're not seeing what they want to see. The first thing I look at is like where are they advertising? What is what is the content of the advertisement? Like did they just take their job description and just slap it on the web?
Hmm.
Are they disclosing all the things they need to disclose, right? In California, we have to have salaries now. So does their job posting have a salary? I did a poll recently, you probably saw it. I asked people like, what is the most important thing that you see on a job posting? Like what draws you to apply? And salary was the most important thing that people are drawn to in a job posting. So it's like that's the first thing I ask is like, well, did you post a salary? Like what is the salary? Because that's the starting point, right? The salary is going to attract a certain type of person, right? a level, if you will. And so if the salary is misaligned from what you're asking for, there's probably problem number one, right? I look at the job title. Sometimes the job title can capture the wrong audience. Some customers just use weird titles. Others over title things, some under title. So money and title kind of have to be in alignment. So if they're not seeing what they want to see, right? You just look at the basics. What are the basics, right? What's the job posting say? What's the salary say? What does the job title say? And is that market rate? Is that market value? Does that fit within what I've been seeing, or that's actually on the web? You can look at it really quick and know, like, oh, you're off quite a bit. So
Yeah.
the auditing starts with what have you currently done, what's not working, and then like let's start there. Because if that's in alignment, if pay is in alignment, the job title's in alignment, and the posting is not scary, then that's really what ends up happening next is what type of job are we looking for? Are you looking for a very niche skill set that really doesn't exist in our area in abundance versus is it a common job, but you're just getting random applicants? Again, where they're posting it and all that other information we have to look at that first. Because sometimes I've even offered to the client, send me who applied. Just send me all the applicants. Because I could probably screen them far faster than they can and know, oh man, there's 3 or 4 gems in here you absolutely missed. But again,
Mhm.
because they maybe don't know what they're looking at or what have you, they could miss a diamond in the rough just simply because rushed, hurried, missed it,
Right.
didn't understand it, assumed something, and it's really interesting. So, those are the first places I look, right? Like what are you guys currently doing? Is it in market alignment? And let's take a look at who's actually in the applicant pile before we really just disregard everyone. And so,
Yeah. That's a
yeah,
great summary. Yeah. Good way to
absolutely.
summarize it.
Yeah.
So looking 3 to 5 years ahead, what part of talent acquisition gets more automated and what part becomes even more dependent on trusting human recruiters?
What I've seen a lot and a lot of the tools that I'm seeing being built are a lot on the intake process, right? Giving applicants an opportunity to apply for a job, but actually there's an interactive application process where they're having the opportunity to answer questions along with their resume, right? It's almost like a three-dimensional application where there's a couple intake questions, there's videos recorded or their voice being recorded. I definitely see that on the uptick, and that's very interesting to me because as a recruiter, if your intake is a lot of people and you have the opportunity to hear them and see how they respond to questions, that's that's far better than again making the judgment on the two piece of paper. So I'm curious to see where that heads because that's something I've got my
Mhm.
eye on. There's tools now that we use when we're recruiting for board positions and things like that. That
Right.
it's like
Mhm.
answer this question. You have 3 takes on camera to give me an answer. I think that's so slick. I want to see more of that because that gives someone to see me for me and not just the resume, right? What was the second part of that question that you were talking about
So what becomes more dependent on,
more
AI
on
is
the
going to
human?
have automation on the human touch. Yeah. What's more dependent on it? Do you think part of it will
Yeah.
be that we realize that AI is not fit in a certain segments that it gets shoved into and then people back out and say,
Yeah.
just need to be able to touch this a little bit more? Or is it just
Yeah.
something that stays human touch? So yeah, what you think is
Yeah.
affected?
I think what's mostly affected, honestly, on the human front is actually I'm just gonna honestly say, I would like to continue to see humans stay involved with every step of the processes. Meaning, um, when when there's an interview that's occurring, when there's a scheduling of an interviewing that's occurring, we need the candidate to know that there's a human on the other side of that screen.
Mhm.
We need to trust that, like, if I need to call 411 during this process, I know that I can reach out to a person, talk to a person, explain the situation, and move on. We can't
Mhm.
lose the ability for someone to be able to just get in contact with a human throughout the process, right? It's like when you call somewhere and you get an automated teller and you're just frantically pushing 0 because you know none of the options suit your needs.
Right. Yeah.
And just so knowing that there is a way to get a human in the event that what we've laid out doesn't fit your situation. I just really think that humans are always gonna have to be there because at the end of the day, we feel most understood when we're getting understood by another human, not by a computer, but by another human being. And in the recruiting process, we are hiring a human, we're not hiring a computer. So let's just make sure that the application process allows for them to connect with a human at any point in time, even if it's questions, rescheduling, what have you. So, like, say, for instance, you have to reschedule an interview because you can't make it for one reason or another. Yeah, you can reschedule it on the app, but what if it's like record a video to tell us that you can't make it and somebody will call you back to reschedule or leave a message and somebody will be in touch with you and it's an actual person reaching back out saying, "Hey, we got your reschedule. So sorry about that.
Mhm.
We see that you dialed it in. We'll make sure that that works out. Thanks for letting us know." I wish there was a way to make humans know that there is someone monitoring the puppet that they are interfacing with at that point in time. It just makes people feel like there's a genuity to it, right? We're not just being marched along by a computer or marched along in a system and are they seeing me for me, right? That I think is what makes talent acquisition really, really tricky is for the experience to be meaningful, purposeful, genuine, and that you cannot do that with a computer. That has to be
Yeah,
with a human being at some point in the
yeah,
process, if
yeah. It's
not
a very,
multiple touch points. There's tons of opportunity, tons.
yeah. It's a very balanced answer between the two things, right? Benefiting from technology, but keeping it where it doesn't take over, and keeping that human touch, which we need. It's the genuineness, as you mentioned. So, Neki, where can people find you and talent?
I find me, oh my gosh. Well, I do live in Oakdale, so you can always find me in Oakdale, California. No, we're on the web. We post all of our career opportunities on the web, on LinkedIn regularly. We post content regularly. I do a lot of speaking engagements. You can go to our website, talentgroup-hr.com. Honestly, I make myself pretty publicly available. If you Googled my name today, you could probably find me very quickly. But yeah, I do try to make myself visible in as much aspects as possible just because people are on the go, right? So you never know when you're gonna need me. So I try to be available on all aspects of the web, honestly. My digital footprint is probably pretty big at this point.
Yes. Nikki Garcia, thanks so much for joining us. Nikki Garcia from the Talent Group. We appreciate you having you on the Argosy
Thanks, Greg.
podcast.
No, it's
You're
been a
welcome.
pleasure
Yeah.
and for sure. So